Today's theme is the phone. All of our stories are true. And I will begin with mine. Phoning home. There's a phone call for you. What? How could that be? I was staying at a boarding house on the corner of Poplar and Atlantic in Wildwood, New Jersey. No one but my best friend Debbie knew I was there, and Debbie was there with me. Two adventuring teenagers in total control. Are you sure it's for me? Yes, they asked for you by name, said the proprietor, a near worn-out lady of Irish descent who looked to be in her 50s but was probably only 30. Irene was tough but cordial. I could see she was annoyed at having to walk up 3 flights of stairs to inform me of the call. There were no cell phones, no texting back in '75. Feeling guilty and very apprehensive, I followed Irene down a back staircase into the kitchen where a pale blue dial-up clung like sky to earth on a wall of peeling paper, browned and yellowed from cooking grease and smoke. All around lay Irene's secret garden, messy with dirty pots and pans, strewn newspapers and ashtrays filled with crushed cigarettes. It was from this space that Deb and I received our daily buttered bread. Back home, I was not permitted to speak on the phone unless the call had something to do with school, and even then, it would have to be very brief. My parents' only telephone, a lifeline for my mom's incessant gossip, doubled as my father's business horn and had to be kept open at all times, or so I was told. That story, I'd later surmise, was probably manufactured as a way to prevent me from having any sort of social life. All along, the business had a separate line. I ended up in Wildwood after high school because it was required in my family to leave home at 18, either for college, a job, or marriage. Considering I hated school, had already been working since age 12, and never wanted to marry, I opted to vamoose with my best friend to the Jersey Shore and never look back. Apprehensively, I picked up the receiver. I knew it wouldn't be either of my parents. Even a family emergency wouldn't warrant a costly long-distance call. It wouldn't be any of my siblings. We weren't close enough to speak with each other except for an occasional grunt. And although I met a few people on the boardwalk, it never occurred to me that Irene had a phone, so I couldn't possibly have given the number out. And I don't recall telling anyone where I was staying. This call was a genuine mystery. The connection was clean and clear, but what came over the line was a shock that echoes in my ear to this day. It was a long string of high-pitched, almost human-like gibberish that sounded like a tape-recorded voice played backwards at fast speed. And there were no breaks in the delivery. The experience lulled me into a trance and completely curtailed my ability to speak. I don't know how long I was on the line, but finally something deep inside said, just hang up. And with a slow and heavy arm, I placed the receiver back into its cradle, turned and walked upstairs. I never discussed the call with anyone, not even Debbie. It was too scary. And yet the incident never left me. I can still recall its eeriness, and over the years, I've tried to figure out what the call might have meant, who exactly it was on the other end, and why me. Was it some kind of joke? With much contemplation and some recent online searching, I've come up with only one possibility, something even I find hard to believe. According to new science, if you want to contact an extraterrestrial, it can be done by phone today. For a premium rate, you can dial up an alien from central Connecticut via talktoaliens.com. It's only $3.99 a minute. In '75, I may have gotten connected from Wildwood for no money. Those crossed wires cost me a lifetime of mild but gnawing paranoia. Was I about to be abducted? Or had I already been abducted and let loose, and was this the check-in? Is there some sort of tracer in me? And will that call or something even worse happen someday again? Thank you very much. I would like to introduce Cass Collins.
Phoning it in. In the late 20th century, we did some bad things that often felt very good. It seems to me it was easier to carry on mad affaires de coeur before we were all carrying our hearts and minds around in cell phones. How does one even do it these days? An office romance, never seemly, is made less so when one of the participants is married. It was important to have a nom de coeur when leaving a message with a secretary. In those days we had secretaries. Secretaries were very smart. "Tell her Pablo called," said the man who made the Picasso show at MoMA seem pornographic on lunch hour trysts. I named another fellow Jack Armstrong for his all-American man qualities. My heart fluttered whenever a pink message slip with that name appeared on my desk. Coming back from a long lunch hour, during which I speed walked in Ferragamo pumps to Grand Central from the Citibank building on 53rd Street, caught a Metro North train to Irvington-on-Hudson, rendezvoused with my married lover over a plate of freshly caught flounder at a riverside cafe, said passionate goodbyes at the station, and repeated the journey back to my office on the 15th floor. A stack of those ubiquitous pink slips awaited me. I was young. I was foolish, and foolishly in love. What can I say? One of my best friends in those days was a colleague who was also having an office affair. We were each other's beards. As our married lovers made their way to the suburbs every night, we stayed at the office doing the work we didn't do during our daytime encounters with love. We shared enormous sandwiches from the Carnegie Deli for dinner at our desks, or spent twilight hours at the Monkey Bar drinking scotch. Neat. Colleagues thought we were a couple. So did my mother. When an extravagant bouquet of flowers arrived on his inamorata's desk in the afternoon, I knew they had spent their lunch hour eating more than deli sandwiches. And those bouquets arrived frequently enough to stir office gossip to a froth. Never signed, the sender was never discovered, and each lover kept their job. My married lover, alas, was on a budget, so no bouquets for me. Only those delicious pink slips that promised another assignation to come. My beard and I went home alone to our little apartments each night, waiting for the phone to ring when one of our lovers slipped out for a quart of milk or a pack of cigarettes, and managed to use the payphone near their local convenience store for a call that included more sighs than words and seemed to satisfy the desires of the heart until the next day, when we arrived bright and fresh at the office. Ultimately, our office romances died their own likely deaths. No blood was spilled, only tears. These days, payphones are museum specimens, and cell phones have memories that can take down a politician, let alone a love-struck 20-something. I no longer have need of an office or a romance. I have my own married man now. We're married to each other. We're both going a little deaf, needing to read lips to understand each other if either one of us is in the next room. His phone voice is warm and seductive, as it was in the beginning of our affaire de coeur. If only he would carry his cell phone, we could have stirring phone sex without the fear of being caught. But what fun is that? Oh, and next, one of my favorites, Willow Baum.
Nick, my oldest stepchild, turns 29 today. I don't contact him this morning. I'm 3 hours ahead of LA. Once again, I live in upstate New York with my mommy. Once again, we are single. Mom, due to death. Me, due to divorce. I don't contact Nick midday. I shop for eggs, cottage cheese, and shrimp. Wild caught only. Mom and I agree, farm factories where fish eat their own poop should be banned. I don't call Nick after. He's at work. Rude. I'll just pop him a short, sweet text with a dozen emojis. The birthday cake, the cocktail glass, the yellow streamers, and that raven-haired lady in the long red flowing dress that looks like she's doing the tango. The truth is, I am a step-parent whose love for my 4 stepkids hasn't wavered just because their dad wanted out. But their birthdays still feel loaded. Hell, me calling him on his actual birthday might even bug him. Of all the kids, Nick was the one to most resist my, hey, grab a rake and join the rest of us in the backyard, please. Nick might pick up out of obligation. Now, for those kids, I want to be a luxury. I post a birthday wish on Nick's Facebook. It'd look weird if I didn't. His 10,000 friends will think that I forgot, or worse, that I abandoned my stepkids altogether. Right after dinner, I have got to call. Of course, Nick's husband, Jack, is probably about to take him out for dinner or live music. When the kids were in grade school, we used to have dance parties in the kitchen and play songs by new artists for each other. All 4 kids are grown and far away now, and I rarely see them. So I stalk them on Spotify. I make note of who they're listening to as a talking point for our next call, which may be months apart. If I call and Nick is home and hasn't gone out yet, his mom might be over. Calling them, that could be awkward. I just shouldn't call. Nick isn't a phone person, just like me. Like stepmom, like stepson. You know, I've never heard that one because no one ever says that. I want my stepkids to know that I will show up. I want them to experience me as a good listener, a positive force, a steadfast support. But I need to pick up that phone. If I don't call, he might think I forgot. But then the birthday card that I mailed 2 days ago will come and he'll see the post date. Why do I still agonize? It has been 6 years. I call a friend, just tell me what to do. Don't play a surface level game. You and those kids make real effort. You're invested in each other. Just keep showing them you care. They will get that. But all me and the kids have now is whatever moment we happen to be in. She says, that's all anyone has. When I do see each kid, once or twice a year if I'm lucky, I'm sure I make it awkward for them when I make a toast to reunions, togetherness, love. Then I pick up the bill. Friend and I hang up. I must ring Nick now before the pep talk wears off. I reach for my iPhone, head to the kitchen. Mom is on her iPad. Sing to Nick with me? I press Nick in favorites. He probably won't answer. Nick picks up on the second ring. Is this the birthday boy beginning the last year of his second decade? Then I poke Mom and nervously launch into singing Happy Birthday on speaker. Aw, thanks, Willow. Nick's voice is relaxed and upbeat. Willow, Jack and my youngest stepson on speakerphone shout gleefully in the background. My youngest stepson has an internship and is spending the summer in LA with them. "Hello, Pat," the boys yell to my mom. "How are you?" "Getting older, but holding my own." Nick asks what we're doing. "We're about to watch The Handmaid's Tale." "Praise be," yells Jack. "Blessed be the fruit," says my mom. We all crack up. "Guys, give me a minute." Nick takes me off speaker and lowers his voice. I walk away from my mom into the living room. "How are you celebrating?" "We're driving a ridiculous distance tonight to an arcade." The bashful, game-obsessed boy is still inside this young man. Out my bay window, a mama and baby deer feed in our yard. "Come visit us," Nick says. "I would love that." "January?" Wide open, yes. I wonder, can the phone telegraph just how wide I am smiling? Next up is Bill Fellenberg.
Long distance. I was struggling money-wise and academically. I had been living large and quickly burnt through most of my cash and student loan. Dad's promise to send me $100 a month devolved into IOUs. By October of my sophomore year, I was living on chump change, bumming Marlboros and weed from Jake Cutter. We shared a one-bedroom apartment on Broadway, this particular one in Passaic, New Jersey. We lived 2 floors above Harry Platt's Bar and Grill, our landlord's dive overlooking the Passaic freight yard, a loud, chaotic tangle of electrified cable, railroad tracks, switches, and idle train cars. Though I fulfilled the required reading for my classes and handed in most assignments, I deemed myself special enough to forego regular attendance in class. I mean, it was Montclair State, not Princeton. I had read Conrad and Melville like a good boy, but glommed on to Charles Bukowski and R. Crumb. I should have breezed through a light 12 credits of survey courses. Instead, I spent languid afternoons in the student union playing hearts and foosball, and occasionally writing angry, enigmatic poems. I was failing. When I told Jake I planned to drop out, he said it was probably the smartest thing to do, considering I had already failed Supermarket 101. He was snidely referring to the night I was escorted from the AMP by the seafood manager after I stuck my head in the lobster tank, bobbing for lobsters. I blamed it on Halloween and grain alcohol. Later that week, I tried to make conversation with Cutter's girlfriend's sister. We sat on the daybed in the living room / kitchenette. I blurted quotes from Bukowski, but she dozed off. She stirred when I recited this memorable line: "The ass is the face of the soul of sex." Instead of being amused, she leapt off the daybed, wild-eyed and shrieking, like Elsa Lancaster in The Bride of Frankenstein. I blamed Bukowski. I mean, he wrote it, not me. For the final straw, even my heroic intentions went bad. After last call at Harry Platt's, I had tried to break up a slap fest between a cowering old dude and his animated old lady. I didn't know I was interrupting their foreplay. For my gallantry, I still have faint bite mark scars on my thumb. I had hit rock bottom, or so I hoped. I went to the college registrar's office to officially withdraw and took a bus back to Passaic. My old Chevy lay comatose on Broadway, riddled with problems too expensive to fix. Before I walked up to my apartment, I made 2 phone calls from Platt's. First, I called Dad at work. I didn't decide whether I gently remind him about the promised money or give him a double-barrel blast of shame, how he deserved an F for being a dropout father ever since my mother sailed back to Japan long ago. He picked up and said, "Hello, Bill Fellenberg speaking." It's very Twilight Zone to hear that. That's me at the other end of the line. Quietly, I hang up. Next, I drop 7 quarters into the phone and connect with Roxanne. It pays for 3 minutes before the machine asks for more. We are high school sweethearts beyond our peak, stumbling from one long distance call to the other. Roxanne and I decide to reunite back home for the holidays. The day after Christmas, we take slow, reluctant buses from Freehold to Newark, then transfer to Passaic. We pass by desperate neighborhoods that no longer matter. We are together urgently and sadly for a night and a day. Like all doomed lovers, we imagine a future. It's ironic, but Roxanne says she's dropping out too. She can't keep up with the nursing program at Northeastern, and Boston's too cold. We're in a laundromat watching our clothes spin. Roxanne says that maybe we should get married. I remind her I'm a failed English major, recently hired as a stock boy and messenger. Roxanne begins sorting clothes. You're right. It was a childish thought. She looks at me with those dark almond eyes so beautiful I could weep. The slow, rusty clatter of empty train cars being shunted back and forth is a background music for this moment when you know your first love can't be your last. And even though it's nobody's fault, it still feels like somebody should apologize. I know we've been cheated. I have it all figured out. Some creatures shed their skin to grow. Instead, we will shed each other. Bill? Roxanne asks. It's a question, like roll call for attendance. For once, I'm speechless. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Kiki Reginato.
I went to the platonic ideal of a liberal arts college. Nestled in the quaint corner of Massachusetts, the exit right before the Cape. If we're being brutally honest, I may have gone there so I could wear cable knit sweaters while standing in front of an 18th century brick building. I imagined before I got there that my roommate would be named Lindsay or Hannah, and she would have a golden retriever named Bailey or Reagan, which are legally the only 2 names you can name a golden retriever. And I would be her cool, hipster New York City roommate who smokes Marlboro Reds and listens to the Decemberists. And I would slowly, but deliberately, corrupt her. By the end of the year, she would be voting for a Democrat. But my roommate was very much not a Lindsay Hannah. When I walked into my dorm that first day, the first thing I saw was the poster of a glittery vampire, Edward Cullen from the Twilight series, smoldering at me. And under that poster is a beer. A beer, aka Abby, was an international student from Kuwait. I later found out that her father was 46th in line to inherit the Kuwaiti throne, which means that only a mere 46 people had to die, and I would be sleeping on the bunk above a princess. Abby was beautiful, with long black hair and almond-shaped eyes, but the instant she opened her mouth, it was as if I was speaking to Lizzie McGuire, but with a Middle Eastern accent. Despite having only known each other for a scant few minutes, the topic of conversation quickly shifted from pleasantries to Abby's chief interest, cute boys. The ones she had seen on campus, at the airport coming to campus, and the ones she'd seen in movies. Suffice it to say, we became fast friends. A few weeks in, Abby gave me her old BlackBerry, and this allowed me to seamlessly blend in with the clique of cool rich girls and gays that ruled the campus with a perfectly manicured fist. And most importantly to Abby, it gave me entree into the clique of cute boys. There was only one problem for Abby. She was technically not allowed to date, and definitely not allowed to date an American, and certainly not allowed to date a white boy. I relished the idea of being a corrupting force in Abby's life. I rewrote the script in my head from corrupting the Hannah Lindsays to now corrupting Abby. How would your parents ever even know that you were dating a boy? I said to her one day as we were driving in her taupe-colored Hummer that her parents purchased for her. Oh, I couldn't. All my cousins at BU have their white boyfriends, but I don't know, I just couldn't do it, she said. As she said this, she practically drove into oncoming traffic on I-95. Because the thing about Abby is that since she procured her driver's license the same way you get everything in Kuwait, by bribing the test guy, she was probably the worst driver in the Boston metro area. As we got back to campus and she was explaining to me yet again why it would never work between her and any of the guys that she was lusting after, one of the campus safety officers in his little tan shorts and his little helmet on his little bike was driving along, and in the heat of the story, she missed a stop sign. The campus safety officer swerved out of her way onto a grassy knoll. His bike flew out from under him and landed on some perfectly manicured hedges. Abby came to a screeching halt. We both jumped out of the car and ran over to the campus safety officer, who was lying on his back, mildly stunned. And even more confused now that suddenly before him was this Middle Eastern beauty in a hot pink juicy velour tracksuit, and me, her dirty ragamuffin friend. Before he could open his mouth, Abby was beside him. "Are you okay?" she said, holding his shoulder. She then pulled out her wallet and started to toss $100 bills into this man's hand. She was like 50 Cent at a strip club, throwing hundreds. The campus safety officer and I were now even more stunned. He was holding about $1,000 and the hundreds kept coming when he finally was able to muster the words, "Yeah, I think I'm fine." "Oh, that's so good," said Abby with the same level of enthusiasm that one might have if you told them you were getting them a pony. "Here's a little something for your bike and something for your trouble," she said, handing him another fat wad of cash. The campus safety officer, grappling with both his shock, the moral implications of what was going on, and his desire to keep the cash, shed a shaky, "Thank you?" Abby smiled, turned around, and headed back to her taupe Hummer. I followed suit, and we drove away, leaving the safety officer standing next to his dinged-up bike with roughly $3K in tax-free income in his hands. Abby never actually kissed a boy that year. I failed at being a corrupting force in her life. It was, in reality, she who corrupted me by making me an accessory to a hit-and-run and petty bribery. All right, next is Glen of Trees.
Recall the good vibrations is the last I got off on my dictaphone. I was asked in the 8th grade by Mickey Stallone, the leader of the pack, who dressed in straight, tight black pants, black shirt opened down further than I would dare to do my own madras one, who wore an Elvis haircut, who, like me, for some reason, asked, "Why do they put dimes in rubbers?" He laughed, believing I wouldn't get it, even if I knew what a rubber was. "Because if you can't come, call." The conception of homophones had just got planted in my mind. Years later, after I got it, rubbers and all, coming and calling, I wondered what it would have been like if I had gotten it from him. His girlfriend, Arlene Worthington, sat next to me in art class in her short black skirt and open white silk blouse, almost as far down as Mickey's went, were her knockers calling my eyes in for a glance as we were doing negative space drawings and wondering if it was true that our teacher, Dick Chase, was gay or not. Imagine having a name like that, like Crystal Glasscock, who was a friend my lover once knew. What a divine gift, especially if one was to become a drag queen. Spoiler, Dick was. I came to know it firsthand when I returned as a substitute teacher and he couldn't take his eyes off of the positive space in my pants, which were not as tight as Mickey's. When Arlene asked, "Why do they put dimes in rubbers?" I answered, "So you can put your money where your mouth is." "You didn't get that from Mickey?" she asked. We're talking when there were phone booths at street corners, not yet indulging in the conceptual art piece of how many jocks can jam themselves into one. Most of us had party lines in our homes, having nothing to do with politics or Studio 54. We had sock hops, an American Bandstand with Dick Clark, which was like, man, really in. And religiously before dinner, I observed looking at those cool kids and badass dancers, just like Mickey and Arlene. In the 80s, I was now living in New York City, and I scored the job of taking phone orders at the erotic baker. Men and women called in, usually shyly, asking, "Where are you located?" "Behind the counter," I always answered, knowing it was a way to get them relaxed in order to ask my questions, while in the background of my mind they might have heard "doing the jerk" or "Mickey's monkey." I had developed this divine art for playing with words. So with the icing on the cake, on top of which was a semi-erect marzipan phallus, usually, I'd squeeze out in my best handwriting things like "make a wish and blow." On top of Old Smoky, as it were, I came to divine my up-and-coming calling was so rightly aligned as I was transforming spiritually before my very rise to please both man and God, so that indeed I could amen, have my cake, and eat it too. I got into phone sex in order to put myself through the seminary. Before long, I became known for giving the most divine guided meditations. I had my heart on serving my clients the best sex imaginable, understanding this was the first time for most to be getting it on with another guy. For safe sex, it couldn't be beat, without a rubber even, and in no time at all, I had them in the palm of my hand, moaning as I cranked up Come on, baby, light my fire. Ready for icing the cake. Getting into it good and hard, even if it was just by vibrations. Until when, yes, when all charged up, right before the other schlong was about to erupt over the phone, for that out-of-sight flying fuck, I'd shout, wait, and break into Sly's hit song, I Want to Take You Higher. After as many callbacks as any drag queen might concoct, on a dime, I changed my sex phone name from Brian, which was brain scrambled, into that of, yes, Crystal Glasscock. Thank you. And next up is Nancy Dymond.
When I was very young, my grandmother had a party line, which is something like a conference call with lurkers. I wanted to be in the party too, but when I'd approach her, she'd put her index finger to her mouth, meaning shush. That wasn't easy for her to do, seeing as she had her hand over the mouthpiece. Later, she explained that the party line had rules. Everyone on the party line had a unique ring. Her ring was a short, long short. No one was supposed to pick up a ring that wasn't their own. But if you were curious or possibly concerned about someone, you could wait a while after someone else's ring, then slowly and quietly lift the receiver with one hand, muffling the mouthpiece with the other. Everyone did it. No one admitted doing it. News traveled quickly through the rural region that way. On Sundays, people exchanged opinions about each other's plights, knowing full well how the news had been broadcast. Although it amounted to gossip, it also brought comfort to those who'd lost someone, quick action in cases of emergency, gifts of food or help in running errands. Church was the place all the news came together, a Methodist church in my grandmother's case. My father was brought up Methodist and grew up to become a minister. He was always trying to convince me to join a church. I finally asked him why he thought it was so important. He answered by asking, "Who will come to your house to put out the fire?" I took it to mean that he felt the whole community was connected through the church, and it used to be true. This story is about a phone call that was happily surprising to my family of 4 children and first husband, and amusingly misunderstood by some friendly eavesdroppers. In 1988, the 6 of us lived in an old farmhouse on an 83-acre farm among farmers and hunters. While I worked as a bookkeeper, Mark drove school bus and played farmer, caring for farm animals with varying degrees of success. After he had had his fill of chickens, who flew the coop and found they could lay their eggs in hidey holes and roost undisturbed in the barn's roof rafters, he tried pigs. Pigs were followed by rabbits. Rabbits were nice, but useless, since the kids went into fits of weeping regarding their meat potential. Fortunately, Mark wasn't interested in raising cows. There was a segment of our farm chapter that nearly involved hiding a stolen elephant, but that's a different story. The farm was nearly empty of animals when Mark made friends with a lovely couple who raised goats. They decided to give him a sister and a brother, Mimi and Louie, and later a pregnant female, Dark Star. Of all the animals he had tried to raise, the goats were the most fun. After school, the kids would race to the barn to take the goats for a walk around the big pond. When Dark Star was due to have her kid, we knew we needed to stay close to home. One night, we decided to take a chance and go out to dinner with the children. We arranged for the couple who'd given us these lovely animals to babysit for a few hours, just in case. We were enjoying our meals in the restaurant when our waitress walked up to Mark with a telephone, its black electric cable trailing behind her. "Call for you," she said. "It's a girl," Mark announced as the waitress took the phone from him. A little while later, the waitress returned with the phone. "Another call for you," she smiled, once more handing him the phone. "It's twins." Pleased and excited, we all clapped our hands. We were eating dessert when the third call came in. At that point, we were a bit concerned about the state of Dark Star and her babies. Worry began to mount when we heard Mark say, "Really, isn't that a bit unusual?" He nodded his head, then looked up from the phone at us and said, in a celebratory tone of voice, "Triplets!" To our astonishment, the room erupted in congratulatory applause from our fellow diners. We laughed and waved our acknowledgement, paid our check, and left everyone busily discussing the blessed event. Thank you. Next up is Dawn McIntyre.
Smartphones were available at the time of the following encounter, but I didn't have one. All the cool people had gotten theirs already, but my flip phone was new. It was fine for making calls, and since all my friends had one too, nobody texted me anyway. One day, my writers group learned about a similar group in our area and had the bright idea to join forces for a reading of our works in progress, perhaps to benefit the library, a literacy program, or a local charity. I contacted them and suggested that one of their members meet with me at a restaurant to discuss the possibilities. On that afternoon, I headed over with my notebook full of ideas. When the hostess greeted me, I asked for a table for two and said I was waiting for a friend, a young lady I'll now call Bonnie. I sat, ordered a glass of wine, and waited. And waited. Just as I was about to get up and wander around looking for her, my phone made a sound I had never heard before. I dug it out of my purse and found, to my horror, that I had gotten a text. It was Bonnie, who was at the bar, wondering what had become of me. I fumbled with the little buttons for a moment, no keyboard, said screw it, rose and made a beeline for the bar. We met. She, the stylish, urbane young thing, frowning at her glowing smart device, and me, the middle-aged dolt, clutching a flip phone. She eyed me warily. "I'm sorry," I said, "I don't text. Are you Bonnie?" I thought I'd said it nicely. I mean, I was smiling and everything. But she looked grim and gave me the slightest of nods. "Yes, you don't... Never mind. Have you gotten us a table?" I assured her that I had, and she followed me back to the dining room. Although she had not finished her glass of wine, she asked the server for another one. "It's nice to meet you," I said. "We did the attempt at getting to know you thing, and I hoped we'd get along just fine. After all, we were both authors, both loved writing and reading." First topic was a mistake. "Where are you from?" I asked. "Philadelphia. And you?" "New Jersey." Turned out to be an unfortunate answer. Her expression told me that she belonged to the enormous group of people who dislike everything about and everyone from New Jersey. I let it pass. Next topic was no better. "Where did you go to college?" she asked. No college, I'm a high school graduate." I actually saw her roll her eyes and turn to stare out of the window, pressing a delicate hand to her no doubt pounding forehead. I tried to turn the conversation to common ground, like, for example, the reason we were there in the first place. But she threw me a curveball and asked if I had read a current bestseller. I was forced to admit that my reading habits were eclectic at best. I read a lot of old books because they're free for Kindle, and bestsellers typically a few years after everyone else has. She closed her eyes and mumbled to herself, "I can do this, I can do this." I mentioned that I had a book out at the time, and she seemed interested at first until she learned it had been self-published. I had really enjoyed a children's book she had edited, and when I told her so, she seemed to brighten. Until, of course, I said that it had struck a chord in me because it was about a group of tools and how much they loved their jobs, and that I had been a carpenter for some years. This caused her to gasp, and she nearly bolted from her seat. I managed to steer the conversation back to the collaborative project at hand, and we both muttered things, scribbled some notes, and finished our wine and appetizers. I could tell the event wasn't going to happen. Then Bonnie's very cool smartphone sounded a tone, and thus reminded her of another appointment she needed to get to. I think we were both relieved. When we parted outside the door of the restaurant, I swear she actually trotted away from the humiliating scene of her forced encounter with the worst sort of riffraff. She probably showered when she got home. I hope she recovered. I remain unapologetically ordinary, but at least now I have a smartphone. Thank you. And our next Yarnslinger is Greg Triggs.
Greg Triggs, boy receptionist. Promise me you will be as well behaved as you've ever been. Well, when am I badly behaved? Okay, why? Your grandma has a doctor's appointment and no one can take her. Someone has to stay home to answer the business phone. Well, what about Dad? It's his business. Shouldn't he answer the phone? Let's not dwell on shoulds today, okay? You've got to stay home and be very careful. I can't worry about you and get everything else done. If anything happens, run for help, but nothing bad is going to happen. I nod. Don't let anyone know you're 7 years old, okay? Sound grown up. I force my voice a little lower, but end up sounding like a drag queen. Okay. What do we say when we answer the business line? Triggs Home Improvement, vinyl is final, may I help you? Yes, and then ask for a phone number and a name. If it's a hard one, ask them to spell it. Write it all down here. She shows me the message pad that has the phone number of every tavern in town written on the inside cover. Got it. Okay, she says, kissing me on the forehead. Now, I wouldn't do this if I weren't desperate. Everyone is waiting in the car. She kisses me on the forehead again and starts to leave. Pausing at the door, she turns around as if she has something to say. Her lips purse for a second. She stares at me with sad eyes before smiling and saying, "Bye, I love you." I stare at the phone, anticipating it will ring any second. It doesn't. There is, however, a shift in the room. The kitchen has become my office, and I'm a receptionist like my sister Emily. I guess that means I'm a lady. So I'm wearing a skirt and a blazer with a ruffled blouse. My hair is frosted like the ladies on TV. I am beautiful. I have long fingernails, but red seems kind of cheap, so not that. Maybe a soft pink, which sounds perfect. The phone rings. Oh my. I pick it up, but my inner office professional senses that seems needy. I wait until the third ring. Picking up the beige receiver, I flash on a lesson from my young acting class. You only have one chance to make a first impression. I clear my throat and clearly say, "Triggs Home Improvement, how may I help you?" Oh, I forgot the vinyl part, but I'll remember that next time. "What did you say?" says the nice woman on the other line. I repeat it, remembering the vinyl on the other side. "Oh, I'm sorry, wrong number. Hang up, dial tone. Over." Easy enough. 2 other calls come in and go perfectly. My inner receptionist is starting to realize that this job is just a stepping stone to bigger and better things. I'm sure to meet an eligible young bachelor. He won't want me to work, but I'll insist. After all, he knew I was a career gal when we met. The phone rings again. This time I pick up a Triggs branded ballpoint pen for the taking of messages. After all, I am the communication hub for the entire operation. I will not allow myself to keep our important customers waiting. Hello, Triggs Home Improvement, blah, blah, blah. Is Ray Triggs there? Asks a gruff voice. No, but I'd be happy to take a message. Someone else from the company, AKA my mom, will get back to you as soon as possible. Really? Because this is the fourth message I've left and I've yet to hear back from him. His wife and his stepson have called, but I want to talk to the owner, says the sexist man who doesn't know that he's better off talking with my mom anyway. I'll do my best to make sure. He cuts me off. Lady, your best isn't good enough. You may have to put up with this shit, but I don't. Tell that asshole you work for that no one showed up on the start date as listed. I'm canceling the sales contract, says the man who doesn't know he's speaking to a child. Hang up, dial tone, call over. Left in the silence after that call, I just want to quit.